You're listening to Marriage Minute with Pastors Richard and Donna Spears, impacting marriages that leave a lasting legacy. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Marriage Minute. It's our podcast that we release every Tuesday with exclusive and specific content that you can utilize to increase and make your marriage all that it can be. As a reminder, last week we covered soul ties, so I'm hoping you guys were blessed by that. At least maybe give you some insight as to why things might not be completely smooth in your marriage as far as looking back and looking at those things in our past that have created soul ties. And please keep those questions coming. We love to be able to answer those and to allow God to get in there and make your marriage all that it can be. So today I want to talk about busyness. So the sneaky deception of busyness. I am very well versed in being busy. I am a doer. I take action, and oftentimes I find it very hard to be still and know that God is God, because I tend to just go, and sometimes and oftentimes things can take a back seat in my life, and one of those being my marriage has so many times, even before I was aware of busyness. I'll jump right in here because some people today believe that busyness is a sign of success. We walk around, we wear it as a badge of honor. We feel guilty if we're not doing something all the time. You can't even sit alone in your own house at times without feeling guilty or shameful that, oh gosh, I need to be doing something. And so that's not a good thing, folks. And so every moment of our day is consumed by doing. And like I said, I've got the t-shirt for that, should have a tattoo. And so really somebody would ask me, how am I doing? How are you feeling? And I would just run down the list of everything that I'm doing, just as if I needed to justify my life to them. That's just a response that I would give. And so, so busyness, it's a big thing. It's a big distraction and deception. It's really not a badge of honor. It pulls you away from so many things in your life, and we can just, wave people off because I've got to go do this and I've got to go do that. And really what's happening is, I know for me, is I didn't want to get into those deep, meaningful conversations. Number one, because I felt like I didn't have time to do that. Which the enemy was lying to me about that. And also, I didn't want to be found out. Like, I don't want to go deep and tell people the deep, dark secrets of what's going on in my life. And not that we tell everybody that, but, it's just, those are hard places to go to and difficult things to talk about. And when we're busy, I found that people just kind of left me alone and left me in my own little world. And unfortunately, I'm kind of happy there. And so I had to really look at what God was asking me for my marriage, for relationships, and it's not about always being alone. I can steal away. I get recharged when I'm on my own and by myself, but too much alone time is just a playground for the enemy to get in there and isolate, and that's not good either. So balance is what, we really need to be looking at. But we can feel, busy and be busy in our careers, even in our social life. But have you considered busyness as a destroyer of your marriage? Have you thought about it that way? Or do you wear it as a badge of honor? I'll just jump right in here with some signs that your life needs to be less busy. These are very helpful for me to just kind of go back and re-examine because like I said, I'm a doer, and you ask me to do something, I'll get her done, and often at the expense of my relationship with my husband, and that's not good. So here's some signs that your life needs to be less busy. You always feel overwhelmed. Now, there are times in my life when I feel very overwhelmed, but it's just because it's the season that I'm in, it's the tasks that I have before me. And so there's pockets of time where I can be extremely busy, and that's okay. It's not an ongoing thing. What we're talking about is you're constantly feeling overwhelmed and you feel like there's just no end in sight. You're forgetting more because you just have so much on your plate, and you choose, and it is a choice, you're choosing to do so many things that some things get forgotten. You're less patient and easily agitated. That is a telltale sign of busyness. You cut people off in conversation. You dismiss people in conversation because you just need to get to that next thing. And so that agitates you. It also is very rude. Your responsibilities, your day-to-day responsibilities are getting neglected because you're so busy. You're too tired for intimacy with your spouse. That's a big one. Now, I know there are lots of things that can come into play. You have little ones, you've got a family, you've got things that take your attention. Babies and toddlers and kids, they do take your attention. But in all things, we need balance, right? Meaningful conversations with your spouse are few and far between. You're not laughing with each other anymore. The things that you found attractive and admirable in your marriage before no longer seem that way. And so that's really a telltale sign that you've just got a lot on your plate and you're not sleeping well. So your mind just never shuts off. That's some things that can let you know that there's this just deception of busyness that's going on in your life, and just kind of take a moment to sit back and just process, even pause the podcast here and process those things. Go back and listen to that list of things that I just said, and really ask yourself, am I doing this? Because ultimately you want peace in your life. And when things disturb or upset that peace in your life, that's really not a quality kind of life, and something needs to change. So what do? Well, basically the issue is that we make everything else in our lives a priority instead of our marriage. Careers, hobbies, kids, friends, they all take priority over your spouse and over your marriage. And then you put your marriage on the back burner because we assume that our marriage is going to be okay. But scripturally, and that's where Richard and I come from, in our platform of Marriage Minute, scripturally in 1 Peter 3:7, it says, "Therefore a man shall leave his father and his mother and hold fast to his wife, and they shall become one flesh." So wives, we need to be putting our husbands first. God first always. After that, our husbands are number one. And husbands, you need to be putting your wives first. And so if your spouse isn't first after God, then who is? Take a minute to think about that. If I'm not putting my spouse first, if I'm not putting attention to my spouse first and my marriage first after God, there's someone in that position that shouldn't be there, and the apple cart is tilting. Someone in that spot is taking that spot that is rightfully your husband's. So just think about that. So what happens when we don't put our marriage first, we don't put our spouses first after God, is the strong foundation of marriage begins to crumble, and it does, and it will. You might not think it does. Cracks start forming in that foundation of marriage. And what that happens, and I've lived it, I know it just trust what I'm saying. It's the entry point for the enemy to get in there and wreak havoc on your marriage. Matthew 19:6 says, "Therefore, what God has joined together, let no man separate." I'm telling you right now, husbands, wives, you need to guard your marriage fiercely. You need to guard it so that the outside world cannot separate it, because what the enemy wants to do is break up families, divorce spouses, and cause fractured families and separated families. Now, I get that that's happened, and that's just life, but you were united with your husband under God, and you need to fight for your marriage. You need to fight fiercely for your marriage and for your spouse. And we must protect our marriages at the core, at its foundation, and guarding the love between the husband and wife, guarding the love between your spouse and you. 1 Peter 5:8, and this is a scripture that you need to really memorize. This is the Amplified Version. It says, "Be sober, well-balanced, and self-disciplined. Be alert and cautious at all times, that the enemy of yours, the devil, prowls around like a roaring lion, fiercely hungry, seeking someone to devour. He wants to devour our marriages. He wants to separate families. He wants to take God out of and Jesus out of marriages and relationships. That's what the real enemy is, the devil. He's the one that is causing all of this pain and suffering, and specifically speaking about marriages here. So we need to set those priorities in our marriage and in our life. We need to set the priority of putting our spouse first after God in our marriage and in our life. So God first, then your spouse, then your children, and then others. So your children are going to see mom and dad making each other a priority there, because they will see that mom is putting Junior first or dad's putting Sissy first. They're going to see that. They're going to adopt that into their lives and into their heart, and they're going to replicate that. So we want to leave a legacy that we can be proud of. And we have said this from the very beginning, the very first podcast and the very first Marriage Minute episode. This is what we're all about, leaving a legacy for your children and their children that you can be proud of. So what you don't want to do is replicate mom putting kids first and leaving dad out, dad putting kids first and leaving mom out. That causes splinters and fractures in the foundation of the marriage, and it's hard to recover from that. It's not impossible, because with God, all things are possible. Amen. So here's some warning signs that busyness is taking a toll on your marriage. And I want you to really take these in and think about it. You think that you have to choose between your spouse and your kids. That is a big red flag if you think that you have to choose between your spouse and your kids. How about spending more time running here and there than with your spouse? I know errands need to happen, daily tasks need to happen. We have jobs and work and things like that. But the times that you're able to spend with your spouse, the quality time that you can spend together, are you spending more time running around thinking you have to do this and have to do that to make your home happy than what really counts is spending quality time with your husband or your wife? How about when you are together, you're in your own little world. So you may not be running around like a chicken with its head cut off trying to get everything done. But when you are sitting down together, you guys are on your phones. You're not even communicating and talking about your day. You're not asking how each other's doing. You're not wanting to know what he needs or she needs today, this moment, this week. Those are the things. Get to know your spouse. Talk to them. Communicate with them. Relate with your spouse. Those are the things that make your spouse feel connected to you and loved and respected. And those are the things that are going to build that strong foundation of marriage that we're talking about. And then another thing is, like I said earlier, disagreements and arguments increase. So when you are at max capacity in your brain, with all of the to-do and the tasks that you need to get done that you think that you have to do, you don't have time for conversation. I know that I've lived it. And my patience was very, very little. And so disagreements and arguments would pop up because I just didn't have time to explain myself as to why I'm so busy and I don't have time to sit here and talk to my husband. And that is just not right. That is not right under God. It's not right in any marriage. And so I certainly wasn't putting Richard first. And so that's what I'm talking about with disagreements and arguments increasing. And you can Google all kinds of stuff of how I can slow down, how I can make our marriage a priority. I didn't want to go into that on this podcast because there are so many different ways. It would have been an hour-long podcast of giving you all suggestions of what you can do to slow down and what you can do to make your spouse a priority. You can Google that. And allow the Lord to speak to you. Just stop and slow down and speak to the Lord, speak to your spouse. And talk about, hey, this is going to give, maybe set those expectations. Moms of little babies, little kids, talk to your spouse about setting an expectation. You might think that he's thinking the house has to be spotless, dinner has to be on the table. all of the kids have to be well cared for and well behaved. And that's just a lie. That's a falsity that us as women adopt early on, especially with being new moms. That keeps us in turmoil and keeps us just spinning our wheels, because honestly, if you really talk to your husband, he's not expecting that at all, but you really haven't had a discussion about it. And so having a discussion, going back to those episodes we talked about expectations, agree upon, hey, we are going to clean the house together when at this time or at that time, or the dishes may not be done. Are you okay? Just talk about it. Communicate really is what I'm talking about. Because when you're not making time for your spouse and you're not making your spouse a priority, which is key to a foundationally strong marriage, what you're really saying to your spouse when you're not making time for them is that they don't matter. And back to what happens when I don't feel like I matter to Richard and Richard doesn't feel like he matters to me in making each other a priority, then your mind starts wandering and cracks start opening for the enemy to get in there and to wreak havoc on your marriage. He will, and he has, and he does. And if you're not on guard and you're not protecting your marriage fiercely and you're not taking to heart some things that people are trying to tell you, me, for example, things are going to crumble. Things aren't going to be, they're not only not going to be the best that God has for you, you are setting yourself up for some pretty dangerous things to happen in your marriage. So we want our spouses to matter. We want them to feel like they matter, because they do. We married each other for a reason. Get back to that. Why did I marry my husband? Why did I marry my spouse? There are reasons there. You rekindle that love for one another. And so just plain and simple, never, ever, ever take your marriage or your spouse for granted. Choose to make your spouse and your marriage a priority today. It is a choice. You're choosing this or that thing over your marriage and over your spouse. And that is not biblical. That is out of order in the way that God had ordained marriage. So if you can do that, if you choose, you may not have all the answers right now and may not understand what it all looks like, but choose, just in choosing to set God first, your marriage, then your spouse, and then your kids, God will bless that. I am telling you right now, He will bless your marriage beyond what you can ever think or imagine. So thank you for tuning in today. Thank you for listening. I hope it blessed you. I hope you take it to heart. If you have questions, ladies, gentlemen, just please, marriageminute@revivalnow.com. Send us an email and we can even chat. This is so important to Richard and I, to be able to impact marriages and impact the lives of you and your spouse and your families and your kids. This is at the heart of what we do. We know it, we've lived it, and that's why we're here sharing it with you. Again, send us an email, marriageminute@revivalnow.com. You can also view us. You can also catch us on the Marriage Minute live broadcast each Wednesday at 11 a.m. on our website at revivalnow.com or Facebook and YouTube. And so, just join us, chat with us, get into relationship with us. We want to impact your marriage and allow God to impact your marriage in a way that will just knock your socks off. Hey, tune in next week, because just like we talked about the sneaky deception of busyness today, next week we're going to talk about the sneaky deception of boredom. So we've got two ends of the spectrum there. So thank you guys for tuning in. We love you, and we'll talk to you next week.
Thank you for listening today. Catch all of our podcasts at revivalnow.com and send us your Marriage Minute questions at marriageminute@revivalnow.com.